The year was 1994. A young archaeologist was conducting routine stabilization work on Temple 13 in Palenque, a lesser-known structure nestled beside the famous Temple of the Inscriptions. While inspecting the steps, she noticed something odd, a small crack along the stone stairs, partially hidden by crumbling masonry and thick jungle growth. Curious, and with her heart beginning to race, she used a flashlight and a mirror to peer into the darkness. There was a moment of breathless awe, a quiet shock that settled into the bones, the kind of silence that comes when you realize history is about to speak. What she saw was astonishing. A narrow passageway, tucked away and sealed off by a stone door long forgotten. So before we begin, tell me, if you could uncover one forgotten place, where would it be? Leave a quiet note in the comments below. Then take a breath. Let your thoughts quiet. And if you hear the hum of the forest tonight, imagine it as an ancient voice calling across the centuries. Now follow me into the jungle, where the Red Queen still waits. The discovery would soon become one of the most significant archaeological finds in Maya history. As the excavation team carefully widened the passage, they entered a hidden corridor leading to 3 chambers. 2 were empty. The third was sealed, covered with stucco and faint traces of ancient paint. When they finally opened it, the air was thick and still. A heavy scent of damp earth filled their lungs. And there, at the heart of the room, stood a stone sarcophagus. Brilliant red cinnabar coated the walls, the floor, and the sarcophagus itself. So vibrant it seemed to shimmer with every flicker of light, casting a warm, otherworldly glow that clung to the air like ancient perfume. So vivid it seemed to pulse in the dim light. Not blood, but something that felt like it. A color that demanded reverence. The jungle is a master of concealment. Its dense foliage muffles the echoes of history, and its tangled roots keep secrets deep within the soil. It listens, it remembers, and for centuries it had kept this secret, safe and silent beneath the canopy. But every so often, the past refuses to remain buried. It whispers through broken stone and pigment worn pale by centuries of silence, as if the tomb itself had waited for this rediscovery to exhale its story into the present. It stirs in the stillness, waiting for a patient hand to uncover it. And when it emerges, it does so slowly, like breath drawn after 1,000 years. In the lush heart of Chiapas, Mexico, hidden behind centuries of growth and silence, stands the ancient Maya city of Palenque, a city where priests once climbed steps in barefoot reverence, where incense curled through the air, thick with chants and the quiet rhythm of jade beads clicking in ceremony. The canopy now covers what was once the heart of a civilization, but listen carefully, and you may still hear its pulse. Palenque was more than a city. It was a vision, carved in limestone and shaped by belief. Its architecture mirrored Maya cosmology, aligning sacred structures with celestial events and reinforcing the divine right of its rulers. A place where sky and earth were joined through ritual and architecture. It flourished during the 7th century, a golden age of Maya thought and power. Its temples, built with astonishing detail, seemed to rise like memories from the forest floor. Intricate stucco masks depicting gods and cosmic symbols adorned the facades, each one echoing the Maya belief in a universe deeply connected to the divine. Water channels mimicked the underworld rivers. Roof combs pointed to the heavens. Everything here had meaning, and the walls of Palenque seemed to speak, not through sound, but through symbols and stone. Stories etched in glyphs, lives recorded in stone relief. These were not merely buildings, they were declarations, aspirations carved in limestone, meant to outlive storms, conquest, and time itself. The Temple of the Inscriptions, grand and solemn, is where King Pakal the Great was laid to rest. Nearby, in Temple 13, the woman now known as the Red Queen was interred. The proximity to Pakal's tomb immediately raised questions. Was she his wife, a high priestess, or someone even more influential than the king himself? Her burial was not an echo of Pakal's, but a ceremony of equal weight. The chamber's careful construction, the sacred red dust, the offerings, all pointed to her singular importance. Inside her tomb, archaeologists found a wealth of offerings, jade ornaments, a headdress of pearls, carvings of careful artistry, and that red powder, cinnabar, a mineral sacred to the Maya. It symbolized blood, life, and death. To coat a body entirely in cinnabar was a ritual of the highest honor, an eternal reminder that this woman mattered, that she held power and presence. Even her remains were not alone. 2 other skeletons, believed to be attendants or sacrificial companions, were found nearby. The presence of these additional remains hints at ceremony, at passage, at a journey not taken alone. And still, there is no inscription, no identifying glyph, only silence and dust. Yet she remains unnamed. No glyphs, no inscriptions tell us who she was. Only the silence of her chamber and the richness of her burial remain. She lies wrapped in questions, draped in mystery. Some believe she was Tz'Akbu Ajao, Pakal's wife. Others suggest she may have been a powerful high priestess or queen in her own right. Theories shift like shadows, none confirmed, all compelling. And in that mystery, there is something sacred, something still alive. This is the story of the Red Queen of Palenque, a woman whose legacy defied time, and whose tomb offers more questions than answers. To understand her story, we must descend, not just into the tomb, but into the layers of history, belief, and memory that shaped her world. The Maya did not fear death. They studied it, painted it, carved it into stone. They dressed it in feathers and jade, gave it names, and placed it at the center of their cosmology. The underworld, Xibalba, was no mere realm of shadows. It was a necessary path, a place of trials, yes, but also of transformation. From it, life returned anew, in the sprouting of maize, in the rise of Venus, in the soul's climb toward the stars. When a noble died, the community didn't just mourn, they prepared. The burial was a passage, a ritual journey. The tomb itself became a sacred vessel, a map of the cosmos. Temple Thuothitin, modest beside the grandeur of Pakal's tomb, was never meant to be overlooked. Its placement spoke of intentional reverence. Whoever lay within was meant to be remembered. Cinnabar, spread with such intensity, it covered not only her bones, but the walls and offerings, wasn't just for preservation. It symbolized sacred blood, the vital force of kings and gods. To be covered in it was to be touched by the divine. Her headdress, woven of shell, pearl, and jade, evoked the moon and the ocean. It told a story of cycles, of rebirth, of celestial influence. The jade found near her skull gleamed like living water. In Maya thought, jade was life itself. Its green hues mirrored maize leaves, the lifeblood of their civilization. Her companions, one male, one female, had been laid with care, facing her as if in eternal audience. Perhaps they were servants, perhaps guardians. Their presence only deepens the questions. What roles had they played? Were they family? Were they chosen? The silence of their bones leaves us only traces, subtle hints in bone position, in the placement of tools and ornaments. No glyphs served to name her, but the burial speaks for itself. The wealth, the ritual care, the proximity to Pakal, all insist she mattered. Perhaps she walked beside him in life. A queen not in shadow, but in power. Or perhaps she ruled after him, in a time not yet unearthed in script. Some believe she may be Ts'akbu Ajao, a known wife of Pakal, married into Palenque from another noble house. If so, she would have brought not only alliance, but wisdom, ritual knowledge, and celestial legitimacy. Others argue she may have been a spiritual leader, a high priestess whose power transcended titles, one who held the calendar's secrets, the songs of eclipse and equinox. Whatever her name, her presence alters the story. She is not accessory. She is axis. In that sealed tomb, as the archaeologists brushed away dust layer by layer, they uncovered more than relics. They uncovered a presence, calm, commanding, sacred. Imagine the moment they lit their lanterns and watched the cinnabar glow. Red light reflecting off centuries. Not fire, not blood, but something in between. A shimmer of transition. A hush made visible. This tomb was not designed for fear. It was built for reverence, for memory, for return. The silence inside that chamber was not empty. It was kommetamwa, a silence so deep it seemed to vibrate with all the breath once held within it. You can almost picture the final rites, slow, deliberate movements of those who loved her or feared her, laying her to rest with hands trembling, not from sadness, but awe. Each offering placed with intention, a carved bone flute. Here, perhaps once played in a festival, a shell that had touched the sea. The Red Queen did not vanish. She withdrew, into stone, into pigment, into time. Her chamber became not a grave, but a shrine, a sacred echo chamber designed to carry her essence through the generations. Palenque, with its harmony of light and architecture, would have marked her presence in celestial rhythms, light falling on her tomb during solstice or equinox, drawing her memory back into motion. Perhaps every year the priests returned to whisper her name, or maybe they remained silent, knowing the tomb spoke for itself. And still, she waited, through centuries of vines, rain, and silence, through the crumble of empires and the rise of new tongues, until one day a young archaeologist leaned into a crack in a stairway, and there she was, waiting as she had always waited, with patience, with power. Not a ghost, a guardian, not a myth, a memory, still unnamed, still sovereign, still speaking in the silence. It is one thing to walk among ruins, and another to feel them breathe. And here, in Palenque, the stones still seem to sigh. Each carving holds a cadence, each glyph a beat of time, and through these sacred echoes we may glimpse the ceremonies the Red Queen once knew. Ritual was the heartbeat of Maya life. Not confined to the elite, it pulsed through farmers and sat, children and elders alike. But within the temples, ritual became theater, a stage for divine renewal. The Red Queen would have presided over rituals of passage, marriages, births, deaths, offerings of jade and maize, incense and shell. She may have anointed the foreheads of infants with sacred water, or marked warriors returning from conquest with ochre and song. Sound was sacred. Drums, flutes, and conch shells summoned the gods. The rhythm echoed through limestone corridors, carrying prayer from earth to sky. Imagine her standing at the edge of a temple courtyard, the sun casting gold against her headdress, her arms lifted, not in command, but invocation. She was not only a symbol, she was a conduit, a living bridge between worlds. Bloodletting ceremonies were among the most profound. Not violent spectacles, but solemn acts of communion. To offer blood was to nourish the gods, to maintain cosmic balance. Women, too, participated. Noble women like the Red Queen pierced their tongues with obsidian or stingray spines. Threads pulled through the wounds carried prayers. Pain became poetry. These rites were performed not in shadow but in daylight before the people, shared between ruler and ruled, and with each act, power was not just shown, it was sanctified. At night, the ceremonies turned inward. Fires lit temple altars. Shadows danced upon painted walls. Priests read stars while chants swirled into the sky. And somewhere in that darkness, the queen may have stood, listening, not as a sovereign, but as a servant of the sacred. Rituals also served as living records. Every offering left in a cenote, every carving etched on stelae, was a message to time itself. We were here. We believed. We remembered. Perhaps she touched these stones with reverent fingers, whispered blessings into the carved mouths of gods, or stood beside a scribe as he inked the day's sacred tally in red and black. The ceremonies sustained a cosmos always in motion. They called rain, they healed fevers, they honored ancestors, and when eclipses darkened the sky, they calmed the people with songs older than memory. In such moments, the Red Queen's presence was more than symbolic. It was essential. She brought not just order, but reassurance that the world was as it should be. And when her own end approached, perhaps she knew what rites would follow. Perhaps she chose the incense, the songs, the day the doors would be sealed, and perhaps she smiled, not from pride, but from knowing her people would remember, not her name, but her breath within the ritual, her footsteps in the chant, her offering in the silence. Perhaps she stood on the eastern steps during the vernal equinox, watching the sunlight pass perfectly through temple openings, marking time the way her ancestors had for centuries. And perhaps she whispered prayers into the wind, words now lost, but once heavy with meaning. Maybe she taught younger women the language of sky and seed, of rain and reckoning. Maybe her voice carried lullabies and invocations in equal measure. Her presence would have threaded through the city's daily rhythm, not as thunder, but as heartbeat. Maybe she was seen at dawn beside the temple priests, brushing flower petals across the altar stones, offering sweetness to greet the rising sun. And now, even in silence, we still hear it. A rhythm that spans time, that hums beneath stone, that pulses where history meets reverence. The Red Queen's legacy is not in a single artifact, but in the quiet order she helped uphold, in the harmony between cosmos and city, in the grace of a hand raised not to rule, but to bless. And what lingers in the hush between memory and myth is not simply her image, but her intention, not her voice, but the echo it left. The air still carries it, just faintly. A breath drawn long ago, still exhaling through time. Beneath the canopy, among the ruins, the ceremonies do not end. They wait. For dusk, for memory, for us. And if you ever visit Palenque, walk slowly. Let your steps fall in rhythm with hers. Listen. The forest may whisper her name, not as sound, but as silence that remembers. In every temple shadow, in every chime of wind through leaves, there she is. Not gone, simply returned to the ritual. She is still there, just beyond the veil of light, where incense clings to stone, and time folds inward to keep her story whole. The Red Queen's tomb may be quiet now, but above it, life continues to rustle through the trees. The jungle has not forgotten her. The roots that twist through the ruins trace the outlines of temples and memory, and every rainstorm that slides across Palenque's stones feels like a blessing left behind by those who once prayed there. Long after her death, the city above her would fall silent. The chants ceased, the temples crumbled. Palenque was swallowed by green silence, left to sleep beneath centuries of moss and vine. But her presence remained. Even before her rediscovery, the people who lived nearby spoke of the ruins with reverence. The Lacandon Maya, whose traditions still hold threads of ancient belief, considered these places sacred. They whispered of gods who walked in stone, of queens whose spirits still passed through moonlight and mist. It wasn't just memory, it was continuity. And when archaeologists arrived in the 20th century, measuring, cataloguing, studying, some say the jungle watched them back, that there was a hum, an unease, as if the forest itself were deciding whether to trust these intrusions. Yet when the Red Queen's tomb was opened, it offered no malice, only mystery, only presence. It welcomed the light not as a disruption, but as a return. The legacy she left is not carved in names, but in reverence. And slowly, scholars began to listen, not just to the glyphs or bones, but to the silence between them. It's in that silence that her power lives on. The restoration of Temple 13 was more than an archaeological task. It was an act of renewal. Each stone reset, each wall supported, brought her story back into the world. Digital reconstructions have since brought her tomb to global audiences. Visitors now walk virtual replicas, viewing the cinnabar glow on screens across the world. Yet no image can capture the air inside that tomb. The stillness, the weight of presence. Even among scholars, she continues to provoke thought. Was her burial meant to challenge Pakal's dominance in memory? Was she, in her own right, a ruler whose influence has simply been erased by time? Theories ripple outward like stones cast into cenotes. Some point to the sophistication of her burial as evidence of dynastic continuity, that her tomb was not just a resting place, but a political statement. Others examine her dental patterns, her bone structure, trying to trace lineage through genetic whispers. In 2012, DNA tests attempted to resolve her identity. The results? Inconclusive. Not enough surviving genetic material to confirm whether she was kin to Pakal. So the mystery endures. But perhaps that's the point. Perhaps the Red Queen's legacy is not in being defined, but in remaining just out of reach. A symbol not of certainty, but of reverence. A reminder that not all stories must be solved to be sacred. Children now study her tomb in school. Her likeness appears in museums, her story in documentaries. The cinnabar-soaked queen who waited 1,000 years has become part of modern myth. And even in this, her presence remains elegant. She does not dominate the narrative. She haunts it gently. Every discovery about her shifts the lens through which we view Palenque itself. The city becomes more than a record of kings. It becomes a site of balance, between masculine and feminine power, between life and the memory of life. And in that balance, there is harmony. Tourists who climb the temple steps today pause before her chamber. Some speak, some stay silent. All sense that something important happened here. Not dramatic, but essential. Because the Red Queen reminds us, the past is not gone. It's folded into the present. Like the cinnabar that still clings to stone, it lingers, staining the air with memory. The archaeologist who first peered into her tomb now tells the story to new generations. Young scholars, inspired by that discovery, pursue their own questions. What else lies buried? Who else has been forgotten? And most profoundly, how do we listen to the past, not just with science, but with respect? Legacy, after all, is not what survives in stone alone. It's what survives in meaning, and her meaning still grows. In a world that often moves too quickly to remember, she remains a still point, a center, a reminder that reverence has its own kind of power. She is not only a queen, she is a presence. She is not only buried, she is rooted. She is not only history, she is heritage, still sovereign, still unnamed, still with us. And there's something else, something more subtle, but no less important. The very act of wondering about her is an act of remembering, of honoring, of imagining the lives that touched stone, whispered prayers, carved meaning from stars. As scholars return to Palenque year after year, new technologies allow deeper insight. LiDAR scans that map unseen structures beneath the jungle. Chemical analyses of pigment and soil that reveal ritual patterns. Acoustical study of how sound once echoed through courtyards. And always, the Red Queen remains central, a silent ass around which these discoveries turn. Even her tomb, once thought isolated, is now seen as part of a larger ceremonial cluster. Pathways, water channels, and temple alignments suggest that her resting place was more than burial. It was pilgrimage, a space designed not to conceal her, but to elevate her. Pilgrims may have walked in procession to this place, guided by priests, bearing offerings and songs. And as the sun fell through the trees, they would pause, not at the sarcophagus, but at the moment before it. In that pause was reverence. It still is. Today her story is carried far beyond the jungle. Her image is etched into the minds of those who never knew her name. Writers, artists, filmmakers draw from her silence, shaping modern myths from ancient reverence. And in this, she lives again, not through resurrection, but through memory, through presence, through meaning carried forward like flame in a cupped hand. She reminds us that mystery can be holy, that what we don't know may matter just as much as what we do. And she reminds us that to be remembered is not just to be seen, it is to be felt. The Red Queen is still felt, not as a monarch commanding tribute or fear, but as a rhythm in stone, a hush beneath canopy, a pause in the heart of one who listens. And that, in the end, is legacy. Not only to rule, but to remain. Time does not erase all things. Some it softens, some it buries. But others, those steeped in mystery and meaning, it preserves in quieter ways. The Red Queen of Palenque was never forgotten. She was simply waiting, woven into the roots of the city, into the hush that falls just before the first morning bird cries. As more is uncovered at Palenque, what once seemed like isolated brilliance now appears as part of a grander whole. The city was no random sprawl. It was a sacred geometry, a place where memory and design converged, where architecture and astronomy merged into prayer. Researchers now believe that the placement of Temple 13, where the Red Queen was found, is part of a broader alignment, not only with the Temple of the Inscriptions, but with celestial events. During solstices and equinoxes, shafts of sunlight cut through temple corridors in precise angles. Was her tomb placed there to receive light at certain moments of the year? Could it have been meant to awaken the spirit or signal her return in some ceremonial way? The Maya understood time differently, not as a straight line, but as cycles within cycles. Days echoed other days, lives echoed other lives, and death was not an end, but a turn in the spiral. The Red Queen, then, did not vanish. She passed into another pattern. Her breath joined the wind. Her footsteps circled back. Every glyph that survives from Palenque sings in that rhythm. It is written not just in stone, but in the space between carvings, in the cadence of the script itself. Names rise and fall in those patterns like stars across centuries. Yet hers is not among them. And that silence, strangely, makes her more present. To stand before her tomb today is to feel the tension of absence. An unnamed woman buried with royal rites, attended in death by others, wrapped in the sacred pigment of transformation. She defies classification. Queen, priestess, mother, oracle. Perhaps all or none. And perhaps that is what draws us to her. We don't just want to know her name. We want to understand what it meant to be her. What she saw, what she heard in the chants at dawn, what fears she held when the stars disappeared behind clouds and the gods went silent. These questions are not archaeological. They're human. She becomes a mirror for our own wonder. What will remain of us? Will our names be remembered, or only our echoes? We build monuments of steel and glass. We archive data in silent servers. But her story was carved into limestone and pigment, things meant to weather, not to endure. And yet, here she is, outlasting algorithm and empire, teaching us that permanence is not about duration, it's about reverence. Each year, more visitors walk Palenque's paths, not just to see, but to feel. They come to trace the edge of mystery with a fingertip, to walk the threshold between the known and the sacred unknown. And always the Red Queen waits. She waits in the sound of footsteps on temple stairs. She waits in the pause before someone speaks her name aloud. She waits in the shadows, cast by flickering candles, laid quietly by modern Maya, who still return, who still remember, not by name, but by essence. Because legacy is not only what you leave behind, it's what others carry forward. In this, the Red Queen endures. There is power in not knowing, in leaving space for wonder. Modern archaeologists understand this well. As technology advances, the tools at their disposal grow more precise. Ground-penetrating radar, photogrammetry, molecular sequencing. But even now, in the most high-tech excavation, reverence remains essential. A careful hand brushing soil from bone, a breath held before lifting a vessel untouched for centuries. That reverence mirrors what the Maya knew instinctively, that knowledge must be earned, and that some knowledge, especially sacred knowledge, is only given when approached with respect. The Red Queen's tomb is more than an artifact. It is a conversation, one that stretches across language, time, and culture, one that invites us to listen differently. The modern world often demands speed, clarity, answers. But her story teaches slowness. To learn from her, we must unlearn haste. We must return to quiet observation, to the kind of attention that does not dissect, but witnesses, that asks not only what and how, but also why. Why was she placed so close to Pakal? Why does no inscription speak her name? Why was cinnabar poured in such abundance until it blanketed even the air? These questions linger, like incense in a closed room, and perhaps they are not puzzles to solve, but invitations to humility. To acknowledge that some stories are sacred, not because they are known, but because they are unknowable. In this way, the Red Queen becomes not just a historical figure, but a teacher, a guide through the jungle of time. Her lessons are not linear. They do not unfold like textbooks. They reveal themselves in echoes, in memory, in the stillness that follows discovery. Even the archaeologist who found her, the young woman who bent over a cracked stair and peered into shadow, spoke of a presence, not fear, not awe, but something gentler, a welcome, as though the Red Queen had been waiting to be seen again, not to be claimed, but to be acknowledged. And now she is. In classrooms, in temples, in the whispered prayers of descendants and the quiet curiosity of travelers, she has entered a new kind of memory, one not carved in limestone, but carried in story. And so we tell it. We pass it along in soft tones, at bedtime, in late-night conversations, in walks beneath stars where the wind moves like thought across ancient leaves. She is there, in all these places, not as an enigma to solve, but as a presence to feel. And perhaps, in the deepest sense, that is what all stories seek. To be felt, not just remembered. To leave behind more than names and dates. To linger in the spaces between thought and silence. In this way, the Red Queen's story is not hers alone. It is ours now too. It lives in every moment we pause to wonder, and in every breath drawn slow beside ancient stone. She remains, not just as a figure of the past, but as a presence that teaches us how to listen to time itself. The last rays of sunlight stretch long across the ruins, painting the temples in soft gold before retreating into shadow. The jungle begins to hum with nocturnal voices, tree frogs, night birds, the rustle of leaves shifting in unseen currents, and among them, the spirit of the Red Queen remains, silent and serene. We have followed her through stone and ceremony, through blood and cinnabar, through memory and reverence. We have traced the faint lines of her story and stood at the edge of her absence. And now we come to the final veil. What do we know for certain? That she lived, that she was revered, that her burial was unlike any other in Palenque. that her body was encased in red, a sacred hue that speaks not only of death, but of life eternal, that she was not forgotten, even if her name was, and that her presence still holds meaning, even now. In the last light of evening, her story becomes more than history. It becomes reflection. What does it mean to be remembered? Perhaps not through monuments or titles, but through the quiet ripple of legacy, through the way a place changes after we pass, through the way people speak our name or feel our presence long after the sound of our voice is gone. For the Red Queen, remembrance is not etched in inscriptions. It is felt in silence, in the air of a tomb, in the hush of reverence. And perhaps that is enough. The Maya had a word, ku'ul, which meant sacred, but also charged with spirit. Places could be ku'ul, so could objects, so could people. And in her stillness, the Red Queen was ku'ul, not because she ruled, not because she was feared, but because she was remembered, because something about her life left an imprint deep enough to stir across centuries. As the stars emerge above Palenque, aligning themselves as they did 1,000 years ago, we are reminded of cycles, of breath, of return. The Red Queen's breath may have stilled long ago, but in every visitor who pauses before her tomb, she inhales again. We carry her forward, and perhaps that is the final offering we can give, to remember not with noise, but with stillness, to learn not only from the things she held, but from the way she let go, to understand that in the end, it is not glory that endures, it is presence. Legacy does not live only in the grand. It thrives in the quiet persistence of meaning. And here, in this final part of her story, the Red Queen reminds us that endings can be soft, that they need not close with finality, but with release. For centuries, the jungle did not erase her. It preserved her. Roots did not crush her tomb. They guarded it. Vines did not conceal. They veiled. Rain did not wash her memory away. It nourished the ground above her. Nature itself seemed to conspire in reverence. And now we conspire too, by remembering, by wondering, by telling her story again and again, each time with new breath, with renewed awe. The archaeologist who first glimpsed the hidden passage in Templethwaite has often said the moment felt intimate, not like uncovering ruins, but like rediscovering someone long thought gone, like waking someone gently from sleep. The world changed because of that moment. And the woman inside the sarcophagus, she changed the world too, just by being found. Her mystery challenges us to resist the hunger for answers, to instead embrace the power of questions. Who gets remembered? Why do some names endure and others fall away? What stories do we choose to tell, and which do we allow to remain sacred in their silence? The Red Queen gives us no easy answers, but she gives us something deeper. She gives us a space to wonder, a space to feel, a space to remember what it means to be human. In the growing quiet of night, her city fades into shadow, but her presence lingers, even in virtual renderings, where her tomb is reassembled with digital precision. Something of the original still escapes capture. That weight in the air, that breathless pause, that faint tremble in the heart of the one who stands before her. These cannot be simulated, because what she left behind cannot be measured. It can only be sensed. She is more than memory. She is moment. She is every inhalation before reverence, every hush that follows beauty, every gaze held a little longer, because something unspoken passed between you and the past. And when we sleep, perhaps we draw closer, not in dreams of grandeur, but in those quiet wanderings of the soul that know where to go without maps. Perhaps you will meet her there, not with words, not with names, but with presence. You will know her by the calm, by the hush, by the warmth that radiates from forgotten stone. And as you drift further into rest, remember, she is not gone. She is only resting again, still cloaked in cinnabar, still sovereign in silence, still waiting beneath jungle and ski in the breath between centuries. And perhaps that's how she wished it to be. No triumph, no clamor, only the unfolding of time, like petals in the dark. The Maya believed that the soul traveled through the underworld, not as punishment, but as transformation. And at each stage, it was accompanied by memory, by ritual, by love. We cannot know her path, but we can walk a little of it. Each of us who listens with care, who imagines her not as a relic, but as a presence, becomes part of the chorus that honors her. And in that soft honoring, we close this story not with an ending, but with an invitation to see the unseen, to feel the forgotten, to carry forward what silence cannot say, but never stops holding. So now, rest. Close your eyes. Let the hum of the jungle wrap around you. Let the cinnabar of memory settle in your breath, and sleep beneath the stars where her spirit still lingers. A guardian not only of the past, but of the space where dreaming begins.